All right. Is it time for the music? All right. Is it time for the music?
I think it is.
I'm hearing myself twice, which means I'm doing something wrong. There we go. There we go. Good evening, everyone. I hope you're doing well. It's a lovely Tuesday evening, and let's get ready for bedtime. How are you today, Molly?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Hopefully, you can hear me this time.
I can.
Excellent.
And I think everybody can hear us too.
Everybody can, as far as I know. Thank you
I
so
made
much.
sure to bring water with a straw now so that I'm not accidentally slurping on water throughout the whole time. More
I,
dainty.
I didn't bring a straw, but I do have a new fancy glass for today. Ooh.
Oh.
You also may have seen my not fancy glass for today, and that's courtesy of our good friends at Taco Bell, who would never dream of sponsoring us, but sometimes Daddy needs
So
caffeine.
consider them friends.
Right. Okay. So today we're going to start off with the our traditional little golden book of 365 stories day for today, September 11th. A bit of a sad day for us Americans, and I hope this makes you feel a little nicer. This is called The Giddy Little Giraffe. The little giraffe had such a way of eating. He finicked over which leaf he should eat, and dawdled over every bite, and spent so much time looking around to see what his friends were doing that when he had finished breakfast, they were going in for their lunch. Lunch took that giddy little giraffe until supper time, and when he finally finished supper, all the other little animals were ready for bed. Ho-hum, they were saying. We're too sleepy to play any more. Good night. So the little giraffe went to bed too. What else could he do, all alone in the night? But lots of times he didn't go right to sleep. He kept wondering how he could ever find time in the day for playing, when all he ever had time to do was eat his meals. And one night, he thought he knew. I'll just stop eating, that giddy little giraffe told himself. Then I'll have lots of time to play. And the next morning, he didn't eat one single bite of breakfast. Instead, he played all morning with his friends, racing and playing tag and having the time of his life. By lunchtime, the little giraffe was hungry as a bear. Oh dear, he said, I'll have to eat after all. But with his fine big appetite, the little giraffe didn't finnick or dawdle or fiddle around at all. He ate his whole lunch in a jiffy and was ready to play even before his friends. Don't go away, they called. Wait for us. I will, smiled the little giraffe, feeling fine and full, and most awfully pleased to be the first one out to play. And here's our friend, the giddy giraffe. And that's today's story of the day. Ooh. It's a nice little way to break in. What are you going to be reading for us today, Molly?
I'm going to start out with a book that I've heard a lot of wonderful things about. It's called Wonder. Apparently, it's a movie, but I haven't seen it. I haven't heard of it, but it's by PJ Palacio, I believe is how you say it. Could be wrong. I apologize if I am. But it's a very highly acclaimed book, so I'm excited to read it. And it's a little bit longer,
Excellent.
so I figured I could give you a little bit of a break for your voice.
Okay.
So I don't know how much we want to read, because I think it's kind of broken up into chapters. So I don't know. We can play it by ear.
Okay. Well, you read as much as you want, and then when you get tired, we'll deal with it.
Okay. Let me know in chat if anybody's read this book or is familiar with it. Okay. Part 1, Ordinary. I know I'm not an ordinary 10-year-old kid. I mean, sure, I do ordinary things. I eat ice cream. I ride my bike. I play ball. I have an Xbox. Stuff like that makes me ordinary, I guess. And I feel ordinary inside. But I know ordinary kids don't make other ordinary kids run away screaming in playgrounds. I know ordinary kids don't get started, or I know ordinary kids don't get stared at wherever they go. If I found a magic lamp, I could have one wish, I would wish that I had a normal face, that no one ever noticed at all. I would wish that I could walk down the street without people seeing me and then doing that look away thing. Here's what I think. The only reason I'm not ordinary is that no one else sees me that way. But I'm kind of used to how I look by now. I know how to pretend I don't see the faces people make. We've all gotten pretty good at that sort of thing. Me, mom, and dad. Via. Actually, I take that back. Via's not so good at it. She can get really annoyed when people do something rude. Like, for instance, one time in the playground, some older kids made some noises. I don't even know what the noises were exactly because I didn't hear them myself. But Via heard and she started yelling at the kids. That's the way she is. I'm not that way. Via doesn't see me as ordinary. She says she does, but if I were ordinary, she wouldn't feel like she needs to protect me as much. And mom and dad don't see me as ordinary either. They see me as extraordinary. I think the only person in the world who realizes how ordinary I am is me. My name is August, by the way. I don't describe what I look like. Whatever you're thinking, it's probably worse. Oh, gotta do the lick the finger thing because that's how you do it fancy. Why I didn't go to school. Okay, so I think this format is almost kind of like a diary entry. So that's actually that I think that makes for some good pacing.
That's what
so
it sounds
we can kind
like.
of see how many entries we want to do. Yeah. Let me actually. Now I get why you got so parched.
Reading takes a lot out of, just speaking in general takes a lot out of you sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Why I didn't go to school. Let's see. Next week I start 5th grade. Since I've never been to a real school before, I'm pretty much totally and completely petrified. People think I haven't gone to school because of the way I look, but it's not that. It's because of all the surgeries I've had. 27 since I was born. The bigger ones happened before I was even 4 years old, so I don't remember those. But I've had 2 or 3 surgeries every year since then, some big, some small. Because I'm little for my age, I have some other medical mysteries that doctors never really figured out. I used to get sick a lot. That's why my parents decided it was better if I didn't go to school. I'm much stronger now, though. The last surgery I had was 8 months ago, and I probably won't have to have any more for another couple of years. Mom homeschools me. She used to be a children's book illustrator. She draws really great fairies and mermaids. Her boy stuff isn't so hot, though. She once tried to draw me a Darth Vader, but it ended up looking like a weird mushroom-shaped robot, which still sounds pretty cool to me. I haven't seen her draw anything in a long time. I think she's too busy taking care of me and Via. I can't say I always wanted to go to school because that wouldn't be exactly true. What I wanted was to go to school, but only if I could be like every other kid going to school. Have lots of friends and hang out after school and stuff like that. I have a few really good friends now. Christopher is my best friend, followed by Zachary and Alex. We've known each other since we were babies, and since they've always known me the way I am, they're used to me. When we were little, we used to have playdates all the time, but then Christopher moved to Bridgeport in Connecticut. That's more than an hour away from where I live in North River Heights, which is the tip top, which is at the top tip of Manhattan. And Zachary and Alex started going to school. It's funny, even though Christopher's the one who moved far away, I still see him more than I see Zachary and Alex. They have all these friends now. If we bump into each other on the street, they're still nice to me, though. They always say hello. I have other friends too, but not as good as Christopher and Zach and Alex were. For instance, Zach and Alex always invited me to their birthday parties when we were little, but Joel and Eamon and Gabe never did. Emma invited me once, but I haven't seen her in a long time. And, of course, I always go to Christopher's birthday. Maybe I'm making too big a deal about birthday parties. This is pretty interesting so far.
Yeah, remind us of the name of the book,
I wasn't quite sure
Mom.
what to. It is called Wonder.
Wonder.
By R.J. Palacio, I believe I want to say. From what we've gathered so far and from what the the illustration on or the cover would suggest is that it's a young boy who's 10 years old who has some kind of physical malformation or something. Um, and this book seems to be kind of like diary entries from him. Okay. How I came to life. I like when Mom tells the story because it makes me laugh so much. It's not funny in the way a joke is funny, but when Mom tells it, V and I just start cracking up. So when I was in my mom's stomach, no one had any idea I would come out looking the way I look. Mom had Via 4 years before, and that had been such a, quote, walk in the park, Mom's expression, that there was no reason to run any special tests. About 2 months before I was born, the doctors realized there was something wrong with my face, but they didn't think it was going to be bad. They told Mom and Dad I had a cleft palate and some other stuff going on. They called it small anomalies. Small anomalies, sorry. There were 2 nurses in the delivery room the night I was born. One was very nice and sweet. The other one, Mom said, did not seem at all nice or sweet. She had very big arms. Here comes the funny part. And kept farting. Like she'd bring Mom some ice chips and then fart. She'd check Mom's blood pressure and fart. Mom says it was unbelievable because the nurse never even said, "Excuse me." Meanwhile, Mom's regular doctor wasn't on duty that night, so Mom got stuck with this cranky kid doctor she and Dad nicknamed Dookie after some TV show or something. They didn't actually call him that to his face. But Mom says that even though everyone in the room was kind of grumpy, Dad kept making her laugh all night. When I came out of Mom's stomach, she said the whole room got very quiet. Mom didn't even get a chance to look at me because the nice nurse immediately rushed me out of the room. Dad was in such a hurry to follow her that he dropped the video camera, which broke into a million pieces. And then Mom got very upset and tried to get out of bed to see where they were going. But the farting nurse put her very big arms on Mom to keep her down in the bed. They were practically fighting because Mom was hysterical and the farting nurse was yelling at her to stay calm, and then they both started screaming for the doctor. But guess what? He had fainted right on the floor. So when the farting nurse saw that he had fainted, she started pushing him with her foot to get him to wake up, yelling at him the whole time. "What kind of doctor are you? What kind of doctor are you? Get up, get up." And then all of a sudden, she let out the biggest, loudest, smelliest fart in the history of farts. Mom thinks it was actually the fart that finally woke the doctor up. This is really funny. I'm 29. Anyway, when Mom tells the story, she acts out all the parts, including the farting noises. And it is so, so, so funny. Mom says the farting nurse turned out to be a very nice woman. She stayed with Mom the whole night. Didn't leave her side even after Dad came back and the doctors told them how sick I was. Mom remembers exactly what the nurse whispered in her ear when the doctor told her I probably wouldn't live through the night. She said, "Everyone born of God overcometh the world." And the next day, after I had lived through the night, it was the nurse who held Mom's hand when they brought her to meet me for the first time. Mom says by then they had told her all about me. She had been preparing herself for the seeing of me, but she says that when she looked down into my tiny mushed up face for the first time, all she could see was how pretty my eyes were. Mom is beautiful, by the way, and Dad is handsome. Via is pretty, in case you were wondering. Okay. Christopher's house. I was really bummed when Christopher moved away 3 years ago. We were both around 7 then. We used to spend hours playing with our Star Wars action figures and dueling with our lightsabers. I miss that. Last spring, we drove over to Christopher's house in Bridgeport. Me and Christopher were looking for snacks in the kitchen, and I heard Mom talking to Lisa, Christopher's mom, about going to school in the fall. I had never ever heard her mention school before. "What are you talking about?" I said. Mom looked surprised, like she hadn't meant for me to hear. "You should tell him about what you've been thinking, Isabel," Dad said. He was on the other side of the living room talking to Christopher's dad. We shouldn't talk about, we should talk about this later, said Mom. No, I want to know what you were talking about, I answered. Don't you think you're ready for school, Augie? Mom said. Okay, his name's August. I forgot. His name's August, so it's probably Augie. No, I said. I don't either, said Dad. Then that's it. Case closed, I said, shrugging, and I sat in her lap like I was a baby. I just think you need to learn more than I can teach you, Mom said. I mean, come on, Augie. I mean, come on, Augie. You know how bad I am at fractions. What school? I said. I already felt like crying. Beecher Prep, right by us. Wow, that's a great school, Augie, said Lisa, patting my knee. Why not Via School? I said. That's too big, Mom answered. I don't think that would be a good fit for you. I don't want to, I said. I admit, I made my voice sound a little babyish, so it was probably, I don't want to. You don't have to do anything you don't want to, Dad said, coming over and lifting me up from out of my mom's lap. He carried me over to sit on his lap on the other side of the sofa. We won't make you do anything you don't want to do. But it would be good for him, Nate, Mom said. Not if he doesn't want to, answered Dad, looking at me. Not if he's not ready. I saw Mom look at Lisa, who reached over and squeezed her hand. You guys will figure it out, she said to Mom. You always have. Let's just talk about it later, said Mom. I could tell she and Dad were going to get in a fight about it. I wanted Dad to win the fight, though a part of me knew Mom was right. And the truth is, she really was terrible at fractions. Pause for a water break.
It's important to stay hydrated. You're
That's right.
doing wonderful, Molly.
How's well, thank you very much. How is audio? Can you hear me drinking from? I didn't even think about that.
I can't hear it, so I would assume that they can't hear it either, but
okay, cool.
I can turn you up if you'd like.
Driving. What's that?
I can turn you up if you'd like.
I don't know. I can't understand what you're saying. All I can understand is if you like.
I was just joking that I could turn you up if you'd like.
Oh, you can turn me up. Oh, okay. Sorry. Whatever. It's what the people want. Driving. It was a long drive home. I fell asleep in the back seat like I always do, my head in Via's lap like she was my pillow, a towel wrapped around the seat belt so I wouldn't drool all over her. Via fell asleep too, and Mom and Dad talked quietly about grown-up things that I didn't care about. I don't know how long I was sleeping, but when I woke up, there was a full moon outside the car window. It was a purple night, and we were driving on a highway full of cars, and then I heard Mom and Dad talking about me. We can't keep protecting him, Mom whispered to Dad, who was driving. We can't just pretend he's going to wake up tomorrow and this isn't going to be his reality, because it is, Nate. And we have to help him learn to deal with it. We can't just keep avoiding situations that. So sending him off to middle school like a lamb to the slaughter, Dad answered angrily, but he didn't even finish his sentence because he saw me in the mirror looking up. What's a lamb to the slaughter? I asked sleepily. Go back to sleep, Augie, Dad said softly. Everyone will stare at me at school, I said, suddenly crying. Honey, Mom said. She turned around in the front seat and put her hand on my hand. You know, if you don't want to do this, you don't have to. But we spoke to the principal there and told him about you, and he really wants to meet you. What did you tell him about me? How funny you are and how kind and smart. When I told him you read Dragon Rider when you were 6, he was like, wow, I have to meet this kid. Did you tell him anything else? I said. Mom smiled. Her smile kind of hugged me. I told him all about your surgeries and how brave you are, she said. So he knows what I look like, I asked. Well, we brought pictures from last summer in Montauk, Dad said. We showed him pictures of the whole family and the great shot of you holding that flounder on the boat. You were there too? I have to admit, I felt a little disappointed that he was a part of this. Uh, sorry, I'm not sure that that quote doesn't make sense to me. I apologize. Um, you were there too. I have to admit, I felt a little disappointed that he was part of this. Oh, okay. He's saying that his dad, well, he didn't realize that his dad was there too. Okay, sorry guys. Um, you were there too. I have to admit, I felt a little disappointed that he was part of this. We both talked to him. Yes, Dad said. He's a really nice man. You would like him, Mom added. Suddenly it felt like they were on the same side. Wait, so when did you meet him? I said. He took us on a tour of the school last year, said Mom. Last year? I said. So you've been thinking about this for a whole year and you didn't tell me? We didn't know if you even get in, Augie, answered Mom. It's a very hard school to get into. There's a whole admissions process. I didn't see the point in telling you and having you get all worked up about it unnecessarily. But you're right, Augie. We should have told you when we found out last month that you got in, said Dad. In hindsight, yes, I guess. Did that lady who came to the house that time have something to do with this? I said. The one that gave me the test? Yes, actually, said Mom, looking guilty. Yes. You told me it was an IQ test, I said. I don't know about y'all, but I'm super invested in this book. I've never read this before.
This is really, really interesting. I'm really liking it, and I also really like the style of writing.
Yeah, me too. I like that you get to kind of hear his voice, and it's I think because I think they established that he's 10,
I think so.
so I think he's going to be really honest too, which is really nice. I know. Well, that was a white lie, she answered. It was a test you needed to take to get into the school. You did very well on it, by the way. So you lied, I said. A white lie, but yes. Sorry, she said, trying to smile. But when I didn't smile back, she turned around in her seat and faced forward. What's a lamb to the slaughter? I said. Mom sighed and gave Daddy a look. I shouldn't have said that, Dad said, looking at me in the rearview mirror. It's not true. Here's the thing. Mommy and I love you so much. We want to protect you any way we can. It's just sometimes we want to do it in different ways. I don't want to go to school, I answered, folding my arms. It would be good for you, Augie, said Mom. Maybe I'll go next year, I answered, looking out the window. This year would be better, Augie. You know why? Because you'll be going into 5th grade, and that's the first year of middle school for everyone. You won't be the only new kid. I'll be the only kid who looks like me, I said. I'm not going to say it won't be a big challenge for you, because you know better than that, she answered. But it'll be good for you, Augie. You'll make lots of friends, and you'll learn things you'd never learn with me. She turned in her seat again and looked at me. When we took the tour, you know what they had in their science lab? A little baby chick that was just hatching out of its egg. It was so cute. Augie, it actually kind of reminded me of you when you were a little baby, with those big brown eyes of yours. I usually love when they talk about when I was a baby. Sometimes I want to curl up in a little tiny ball and let them hug me and kiss me all over. I miss being a baby, not knowing stuff. But I wasn't in the mood for that now. I don't want to go, I said. How about this? Can you at least meet Mr. Tushman before making up your mind? Mom asked. Mr. Tushman, I said. He's the principal, answered Mom. Mr. Tushman, I repeated. I know, right? Dad answered, smiling and looking at me in the rearview mirror. Can you believe that name, Augie? I mean, who on earth would ever agree to have a name like Mr. Tushman? I smiled even though I didn't want to let them see me smile. Dad was the one person in the world who could make me laugh no matter how much I didn't want to laugh. Dad always made everyone laugh. Augie, you should go to that school just so you can hear his name said over the loudspeaker, Dad said excitedly. Can you imagine how funny that would be? Hello, hello, paging Mr. Tushman. He was using a fake, high old lady voice. Hi, Mr. Tushman. I see you're running a little behind today. Did your did your car get rear-ended? What a bum rap. I started laughing, not even because I thought it was being funny, but because I wasn't in the mood to stay mad anymore. It could be worse though, Dad continued in his normal voice. Mommy and I had a professor in college called Miss Butt. Mom was laughing now too. Is that for real? I said. Roberta Butt, Mom answered, raising her hand as if to swear. Boppy Butt. She had huge cheeks, said Dad. Nate, said Mom. What? She had big cheeks, is all I'm saying. Mom laughed and shook her head at the same time. Hey, I know, said Dad excitedly. Let's fix them up on a blind date. Can you imagine? Miss Butt, meet Mr. Tushman. Mr. Tushman, here's Miss Butt. They could get married and have a bunch of little tushies. Mr. Tushman, answered Mom, shaking her head. Or, poor Mr. Tushman, answered Mom, shaking her head. Augie hasn't even met the man yet, Nate. Who's Mr. Tushman? Or, excuse me, who's Mr. Tushman? Via said groggily. She had just woken up. He's the principal of my new school, I answered. The next entry is paging Mr. Tushman.
I'm glad I had myself muted because that section was really, really funny.
Between that and the farting, I'm really loving this book. It's 100% my humor, which is, I guess, a 10-year-old.
I mean, I'm 36 and I find it hilarious, so.
Yeah. Sorry for messing up a couple times because it's kind of hard for me to see because this thing on my mic is kind of in the way, so I mess up some of the words, so I apologize.
You're doing wonderful, Molly.
I appreciate it. How are people in chat? How are you guys liking it? I can't believe I've never heard of this book before. All right.
I know I'm woefully out of touch with literature lately, so I don't feel terrible about not knowing this book.
Yeah. All right. Paging Mr. Tushman. I would have been more nervous about meeting Mr. Tushman if I'd known I was also going to be meeting some kids from the new school. But I didn't know, so if anything, I was kind of giggly. I couldn't stop thinking about all the jokes Daddy had made about Mr. Tushman's name. So when me and Mom arrived at Beecher Prep a few weeks before the start of school, and I saw Mr. Tushman standing there waiting for us at the entrance, I started giggling right away. He didn't look at all like what I pictured, though. I guess I thought he would have a huge butt, but he didn't. In fact, he was a pretty normal guy, tall and thin, old but not really old. He seemed nice. He shook my mom's hand first. Hi, Mr. Tushman. It's so nice to see you again, said Mom. This is my son, August. Mr. Tushman looked right at me and smiled and nodded. He put his hand out for me to shake. Hi, August, he said totally normally. It's a pleasure to meet you. Hi, I mumbled, dropping my hand into his hand while I looked down at his feet. He is wearing red Adidas. So, he said, kneeling down in front of me so I couldn't look at his sneakers, but had to look at his face. Your mom and dad have told me a lot about you. Like, what have they told you? I asked. Sorry? Honey, you have to speak up, said Mom. Like what? I asked, trying not to mumble. I admit I have a bad habit of mumbling. Well, that you like to read, said Mr. Tushman, and that you're a great artist. He had blue eyes with white eyelashes. And you're into science, right? Uh-huh, I said, nodding. We have a couple of great science electives at Beecher, he said. Maybe you'll take one of them. Uh-huh, I said, though I had no idea what an elective was. So are you ready to take a tour? You mean we're doing that now? I said. Did you think we were going to the movies? He answered, smiling as he stood up. You didn't tell me we were taking a tour, I said to Mom in my accusing voice. Augie, she started to say. It'll be fine, August, said Mr. Tushman, holding his hand out to me. I promise. I think he wanted me to take his hand, but I took Mom's instead. He smiled and started walking toward the entrance. Mommy gave my hand a little squeeze, though. I don't know if it was a I love you squeeze or an I'm sorry squeeze. Probably a little bit of both. The only school I'd ever been inside before was Via's. When I went with Mom and Dad to watch Via sing in spring concerts and stuff like that. This school was very different. It was smaller. It smelled like a hospital. Nice Mrs. Garcia. We followed Mr. Tishman down a few hallways. There weren't a lot of people around, and the few people who were there didn't seem to notice me at all, though that may have been because they didn't see me. I sort of hid behind Mom as I walked. I know that sounds kind of babyish of me, but I wasn't feeling very brave right then. We ended up in a small room with the words Office of the Middle School Director on the door. Inside, there was a desk with a nice seeming lady sitting behind it. This is Mrs. Garcia, said Mr. Tishman. And the lady smiled, and Mom took off her glasses and got up out of her chair. Oh, so I'm sorry. The lady smiled at Mom and took off her glasses and got up out of her chair. My mother shook her hand and said, Isabel Pullman, nice to meet you. And this is August, Mr. Tishman said. Mom kind of stepped to the side a bit so I would move forward. Then that thing happened that I've seen happen a million times before. When I looked up at her, Mrs. Garcia's eyes dropped for a second. It was so fast no one else would have noticed, since the rest of her face stayed exactly the same. She was smiling a really shiny smile. Such a pleasure to meet you, August, she said, holding out her hand for me to shake. Hi, I said quietly, giving her my hand, but I didn't want to look at her face, so I kept staring at her glasses, which hung from a chain around her neck. Wow, what a firm grip, said Mrs. Garcia. Her hand was really warm. The kid's got a killer handshake, Mr. Tishman agreed, and everyone laughed above my head. You can call me Mrs. G, Mrs. Garcia said. I think she was talking to me, but I was looking at all the stuff on her desk now. That's what everyone calls me, Mrs. G. I forgot my combination, Mrs. G. Oh, I forgot my combination, Mrs. G. I need a late pass, Mrs. G. I want to change my elective. Mrs. G is actually the one who runs the place, said Mr. Tishman, which again made all the grown-ups laugh. I'm here every morning by 7:30, Mrs. Garcia continued, still looking at me while I stared at her brown sandals with small purple flowers on the buckles. So if you ever need anything, August, I'm the one to ask, and you can ask me anything. Okay, I mumbled. Oh, look at the cute baby, Mom said, pointing to one of the photographs on Mrs. Garcia's bulletin board. Is he yours? No, my goodness, said Mrs. Garcia, smiling a big smile now. That was totally different from her shiny smile. You've just made my day. He's my grandson. What a cutie, said Mom, shaking her head. How old? In that picture, he was 5 months, I think. But he's big now, almost 8 years old. Wow, said Mom, nodding and smiling. Well, he is absolutely beautiful. Thank you, said Mrs. Garcia, nodding like she was about to say something else about her grandson. But then all of a sudden her smile got a little smaller. We're all going to take very good care of August, she said to Mom, and I saw her give Mom's hand a little squeeze. I looked at Mom's face, and that's when I realized she was just as nervous as I was. I guess I liked Mrs. Garcia when she wasn't wearing her shiny smile. And water break. You guys like Mrs. Garcia so far?
Yeah, she seems nice. She reminds me of a lot of school administrators from elementary school.
Mm-hmm. I think I really like that because I think we all kind of know exactly what he's talking about with that, like, looking at him and then immediately darting down. Because I think we all kind of do that to people who maybe have any type of like physical disability or like visible difference in them, because we don't want to seem rude like we're staring, because we're all kind of taught not to stare, you know?
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting to hear it from his perspective. And I don't think that Mrs. Garcia like means bad by it, you know? but it's an interesting thing, I think. You guys want to keep going?
I think so, as long as your voice is holding up.
Yeah, I think it's getting a little raspy, so everyone's gonna might potentially go down an extra octave throughout the remaining time, but as long as you guys are okay with that,
Totally fine with it.
I'm down to read. All right. Jack, Will, Julian, and Charlotte. We followed Mr. Tishman into a small room across from Mrs. Garcia's desk. He was talking as he closed the door to his office and sat down behind his big desk. Though I wasn't really paying much attention to what he was saying, I was looking around at all the things on his desk. Cool stuff, like a globe that floated in the air and a Rubik's type cube, which made with little mirrors. Sorry, I have a kitty who just likes to interrupt every story time. I think that's going to be our new tradition.
She just wants to be, or he just wants to be part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that Eames or Muppet?
It is Eames. Let's see. Sorry, guys, lost my place. Rubik's type cube made with little mirrors. I liked his office a lot. I liked that there were all these neat little drawings and paintings by students on the walls, framed like they were important. Mom sat down in a chair in front of Mr. Tishman's desk, and even though there was another chair right next to hers, I decided to stand beside her. Why do you have your own room and Mrs. Garcia and Mrs. G doesn't? I said. You mean, why do I have an office? Asked Mr. Tishman. You said she runs the place, I said. Oh, well, I was kind of kidding. Mrs. G is my assistant. Mr. Tishman is the director of the middle school, Mom explained. Do they call you Mr. T? I asked, which made him smile. Do you know who Mr. T is? He answered. I pity the fool, he said in a funny, tough voice, like he was imitating someone. I had no idea what he was talking about. Anyway, no, said Mr. Tishman, shaking his head. No one calls me Mr. T, though I have a feeling I'm called a lot of other. Oh, gotta lick the finger again. Sorry. Though I have a feeling I'm called a lot of other things I don't know about. Let's face it, a name like mine is not so easy to live with. You know what I mean? Here I have to admit I totally laughed because I knew exactly what he meant. My mom and dad had a teacher called Miss Butt, I said. Augie, said Mom, but Mr. Tishman laughed. Now that's bad, said Mr. Tishman, shaking his head. I guess I shouldn't complain. Hey, so listen, August, here's what I thought we would do today. Is that a pumpkin? I said, pointing at a frame painting behind Mr. Tishman's desk. Augie, sweetie, don't interrupt, said Mom. You like it? Said Mr. Tishman, turning around and looking at the painting. I do too. And I thought it was a pumpkin. I do too. And I thought it was a pumpkin too, until the student who gave it to me explained that it was actually not a pumpkin. It is, are you ready for this? A portrait of me. Oh, hold on. Amesy Bear, you are getting a little too intrusive here. Sorry, guys.
He just wants to be part of the show.
I know.
Maybe I'll add Eames to the intro graphic here.
Yeah, if you guys don't mind, I'm just going to feed them real quick because it's usually a sign that that's what they want. I'll be right back. Sorry about that.
No problem. I think I might were you at a stopping point?
Do you think what?
Were you at a stopping point in the story?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you want to go.
Yeah, I think I'll go ahead and drop into some Charlotte's Web, and that'll give your voice a break for a little while, and then we can either pick that up or you can read something else. Either way.
Okay. Yeah. In chat we have I have one other book called the Wonderful Things You Will Be. It's not nearly as long as this, but it's probably a little bit longer than The Places You'll Go. So I don't know if you guys want me to go with that. I'm happy to continue reading Wonder. I'm really enjoying it. So, and if you guys would like, we can just end with um, the wonderful things you'll be towards the end of the stream. Well,
I
we
like
can
that
figure
idea.
it out. Okay, cool.
We can play it by ear, though.
Sounds good. Yeah, let me know what you guys would prefer to hear. We can always save one or the other for another time. But I will be right back.
All right. Sorry, my hair's a little messed up here. Okay, so where we last left off in Charlotte's Web. Let us see. Aha. Where we last left off in Charlotte's Web, we had learned about Charlotte and how she eats and how she lives, and we had a little bit of a lesson about life and death, I guess, and the circle of life. And I have just realized that I need to step away for about 30 seconds, and so I will drop you guys a little bit of music and drop you back into the intro screen, and I will be right back. Okay, and we are back. Sorry, I had a realization that I was having some serious lip issues, and I didn't want you guys to have to listen to all that for the duration of this book. So, as we were, I'm still getting used to running all this, so pardon any little technical snafus. So, we had learned that Charlotte eats flies, and Wilbur did not think that was very nice. So I think Wilbur may have learned a little lesson there, and we're going to go ahead and jump back into Chapter 6, Summer Days. The early summer days on a farm are the happiest and fairest days of the year. Lilacs bloom and make the air sweet and then fade. Apple blossoms come with the lilacs, and the bees visit around among the apple trees. The days grow warm and soft. School ends, and children have time to play and fish for trouts in the brook. Avery often brought a trout home in his pocket, warm and stiff and ready to be fried for his supper. Now that school was over, Fern visited the barn almost every day to sit quietly on her stool. The animals treated her as an equal. The sheep lay calmly at her feet. Around the 1st of July, the workhorses were hitched to the mowing machine, and Mr. Zuckerman climbed into the seat and drove into the field. All morning you could hear the rattle of the machine as it went round and round, while the tall grass fell down behind the cutter bar in long green swaths. Next day, if there was no thunder shower, all hands would help rake and pitch and load, and the hay would be hauled to the barn in the high hay wagon, with Fern and Avery riding at the top of the load. Then the hay would be hoisted sweet and warm into the big loft, until the whole barn seemed like a wonderful bed of timothy and clover. It was fine to jump in, and perfect to hide in, and sometimes Avery would find a little grass snake in the hay, and would add it to the other things in his pocket. Early summer days are a jubilee time for birds. In the fields, around the house, in the barn, in the woods, in the swamp. Everywhere love and songs and nests and eggs. From the edge of the woods, the white-throated sparrow, which must come all the way from Boston, calls, "Oh, Peabody, Peabody, Peabody," on an apple bough. The phoebe teeters and wags its tail and says, "Phoebe, Phoebe." The song sparrow, who knows how brief and lovely life is, says, "Sweet, sweet, sweet interlude, sweet, sweet, sweet interlude." If you enter the barn, the swallows swoop down from the nest and scold, "Cheeky, cheeky," they say. In early summer, there are plenty of things for a child to eat and drink and suck and chew. Dandelion stems are full of milk, clover heads are loaded with nectar, the frigid air is full of ice-cold drinks. Everywhere you look is life. Even the little ball of spit on the weed stalk, if you poke it apart, has a green worm inside it. And on the underside of the leaf of the potato vine are the bright orange eggs of the potato bug. It was on a day in the early summer that the goose eggs hatched. This was an important event in the barn cellar. Fern was there, sitting on her stool when it happened. Except for the goose herself, Charlotte was the first to know that the goslings had at last arrived. The goose knew a day in advance that they were coming. She could hear their weak voices calling from inside the egg. She knew that they were in a desperately cramped position inside the shell and were most anxious to break through and get out. So she sat quite still and talked less than usual. When the first gosling poked its gray-green head through the goose's feathers and looked around, Charlotte spied it and made the announcement. "I am sure," she said, "that every one of us here will be gratified to learn that after 4 weeks of unremitting effort and patience on the part of our friend the goose, she now has something to show for it. The goslings have arrived. May I offer my sincere congratulations?" "Thank you, thank you, thank you," said the goose, nodding and bowing shamelessly. "Thank you," said the gander. I have to remember Wilbur's voice. Goodness. "Congratulations," shouted Wilbur. "How many goslings are there? I can only see one." "There are 7, said the goose. "Fine," said Charlotte. 7 is a lucky number." "Luck had nothing to do with this," said the goose. "It was good management and hard work." At this point, Templeton showed his nose from his hiding place under Wilbur's trough. He glanced at Fern, then crept cautiously toward the goose, keeping close to the wall. Everyone watched him, for he was not well liked, not trusted. I can't remember Templeton's voice either. Goodness, was it a nerdy one? Molly, do you remember what my Templeton voice was?
I think it was like kind of like.
Look, you say you have 7 goslings. Was it like that? Was it like that?
I think so. I mean, that's how it's kind of like in the movie. So maybe that's why I don't know.
Okay,
but just go with that one.
We're gonna go with that. "Look," he began in his sharp voice. "You say you have 7 goslings. There were 8 eggs. What happened to the other egg? Why didn't it hatch?" "It's a dud, I guess," said the goose. "What are you going to do with it?" continued Templeton, his little round beady eyes fixed on the goose. "You can have it," replied the goose. "Roll it away in that nasty collection of yours." Templeton had a bad habit of picking up unusual objects around the farm and storing them in his home. He saved everything. Certainly, said the gander. "You may have the egg, but I'll tell you one thing, Templeton. If I ever catch you poking your ugly nose around our goslings, I'll give you the worst pounding a rat ever took." And the gander opened his strong wings and beat the air with them to show his power. He was strong and brave, but the truth is, both the goose and the gander were worried about Templeton. And with good reason. The rat had no morals, no conscience, no scruples, no consideration, no decency, no milk of rodent kindness, no compunctions, no higher feeling, no friendliness, no anything. He would kill a gosling if he could get away with it. The goose knew it. Everybody knew it. And here's everyone looking with disdain at little Mr. Templeton. The illustrations in this are very nice. With her broad bill, the goose pushed the unhatched egg out of the nest, and the entire company watched in disgust while the rat rolled it away. Even Wilbur, who could eat almost anything, was appalled. "Imagine wanting a junky old rotten egg," he muttered. Murdered, goodness. A rat is a rat, said Charlotte. She laughed a tinkling little laugh. But my friends, if that ancient egg ever breaks, this barn will be untenable. What's that mean? Asked Wilbur. It means nobody will be able to live here on account of the smell. A rotten egg is a regular stink bomb. I won't break it, snarled Templeton. I know what I'm doing. I handle stuff like this all the time. He disappeared into his tunnel, pushing the goose egg in front of him. He pushed and nudged till he succeeded in rolling it to his lair under the trough. That afternoon, when the wind had died down and the barnyard was quiet and warm, the gray goose led her 7 goslings off to nest and out into the world. Mr. Zuckerman spied them when he came with Wilbur's supper. Well, hello there, he said, smiling all over. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 baby geese. Now isn't that lovely? Chapter 7. Bad news. Wilbur liked Charlotte better and better each day. Her campaign against insects seemed sensible and useful. Hardly anybody around the farm had a good word to say for a fly. Flies spent their time pestering others. The cows hated them. The horses detested them. The sheep loathed them. Mr. and Mrs. Zuckerberg were always complaining about them and putting up screens. Wilbur admired the way Charlotte managed. He was particularly glad that she always put her victim to sleep before eating it. It's real thoughtful of you to do that, Charlotte. Yes, she replied in her sweet musical voice. I always give them some anesthetic so they won't feel pain. It's a little service I throw in. As the days went by, Wilbur grew and grew. He ate 3 big meals a day, dreaming. He spent long hours lying on his side, half asleep, dreaming pleasant dreams. He enjoyed good health, and he gained a lot of weight. One afternoon, when Fern was sitting on her stool, the oldest sheep walked into the barn and stopped to pay a call on Wilbur. Hello, she said. Seems to me you're putting on weight. Yes, I guess I am, replied Wilbur. At my age, it's a good idea to keep gaining. Just the same, I don't envy you, said the old sheep. You know why they're fattening you up, don't you? No, said Wilbur. Well, I don't like to spread bad news, said the sheep, but they're fattening you up because they're going to kill you. That's why. They're going to what? Screamed Wilbur. Fern grew rigid in her stool. Kill you, turn you into smoked bacon and ham, continued the old sheep. Almost all young pigs get murdered by the farmer as soon as the real cold weather sets in. There's a regular conspiracy around here to kill you at Christmas time. Everybody's in on the plot. Lurvy, Zuckerman, even John Arable. Mr. Arable? Sobbed Wilbur. Fern's father? Certainly. When a pig is to be butchered, everybody helps. I'm an old sheep, and I see the same thing, same old business, year after year. Arable arrives with his .22, shoots the... Stop! Screamed Wilbur. I don't want to die. Somebody save me. Save me, somebody. Fern was just about to jump up when a voice was heard. Be quiet, Wilbur, said Charlotte, who had been listening to this awful conversation. I can't be quiet, screamed Wilbur, racing up and down. I don't want to be killed. I don't want to die. Is it true what the old sheep says, Charlotte? Is it true they're going to kill me when the cold weather comes? Well, said the spider, plucking thoughtfully at her web, the old sheep has been around this barn a long time. She has seen many a spring pig come and go. If she says they plan to kill you, I'm sure it's true. It's also the dirtiest trick I ever heard of. What people don't think of. Wilbur burst into tears. I don't want to die, he moaned. I want to stay alive, right here in my comfortable manure pile with all my friends. I want to breathe the beautiful air and lie in the beautiful sun. You're certainly making a beautiful noise, snapped the old sheep. I don't want to die, screamed Wilbur, throwing himself to the ground. You shall not die, said Charlotte briskly. What, really? Cried Wilbur. Who's going to save me? I am, said Charlotte. Well, how? Asked Wilbur. That remains to be seen. But I am going to save you, and I want you to quiet down immediately. You're carrying on in a childish way. Stop your crying. I can't stand hysterics. Oh, do I need to be more... I Need to be loud, I guess. So sorry.
Yeah, I don't know if it's, yeah, maybe, I don't know if you need to be closer to the mic. Well, you're already pretty close, but yeah, you might need to be a little bit louder when you're doing Charlotte's
Okay,
voice segment.
I will remember that. Chat, are you hearing it okay? Let me know, because Discord could be being weird as well.
That's true.
I feel like today's gift has been many mouth sounds from me, so I'm trying not to speak directly into the mic. Chapter 8, A Talk at Home. On Sunday morning, Mr. and Mrs. Arable and Fern were sitting at breakfast in the kitchen. Avery had finished up and was upstairs looking for his slingshot. "Did you know that Uncle Homer's goslings had hatched?" asked Fern. "Well, how many?" asked Mr. Arable. "7," replied Fern. "There are 8 eggs, but 1 egg didn't hatch, and the goose told Templeton she didn't want it anymore, so he took it away." "The goose did what?" asked "The goose did what?" asked Mrs. Arable, gazing at her daughter with a queer, worried look. "Told Templeton she didn't want the egg anymore," repeated Fern. "Who is Templeton?" asked Mrs. Arable. "He's the rat," replied Fern. "None of us like him much." "Who's us?" asked Mr. Arable. "Oh, everybody in the barn cellar. Wilbur and the sheep and the lambs and the goose and the gander and the goslings and Charlotte and me." "Charlotte?" said Mrs. Arable. "Who's Charlotte?" "She's Wilbur's best friend. She's terribly clever." "What does she look like?" asked Mrs. Arable. "Well, she has 8 legs. All spiders do, I guess." "Charlotte is a spider?" asked Fern's mother. Fern nodded. "A big gray one. She has a web across the top of Wilbur's doorway. She catches flies and sucks their blood. Wilbur adores her." "Does he really?" said Mrs. Arable rather vaguely. She was staring at Fern with a worried expression on her face. "Oh, yes, Wilbur adores Charlotte," said Fern. Do you know what Charlotte said when the goslings hatched?" "I haven't the faintest idea," said Mr. Arable. "Tell us." "Well, when the first gosling stuck its little head out from under the goose, I was sitting on my stool in the corner, and Charlotte was on her web. She made a speech. She said, 'I am sure that every one of us here in the barn cellar will be gratified to learn that after 4 weeks of unremitting effort and patience on the part of the goose, she now has something to show for it.' Don't you think that was a pleasant thing for her to say?" "Yes, I do," said Mrs. Arable. "And now, Fern, it's time to get ready for Sunday school. And tell Avery to get ready. And this afternoon you can tell me more about what goes on in Uncle Homer's barn. Aren't you spending quite a lot of time there? You go there almost every afternoon, don't you?" "I like it up there," replied Fern. She wiped her mouth and ran upstairs. After she had left the room, Mrs. Arable spoke in a low voice to her husband. "I worry about Fern," she said. "Did you hear the way she rambled on about the animals, pretending that they talked?" Mr. Arable chuckled. "Maybe they do talk," he said. "I've sometimes wondered. At any rate, don't worry about Fern. She's just got a lively imagination. Kids think they hear all sorts of things." "Just the same, I do worry about her," replied Mrs. Arable. "I think I shall ask Dr. Dorian about her the next time I see him. He loves Fern almost as much as we do, and I want him to know how queerly she is acting about that pig and everything. I don't think it's normal. You know perfectly well animals don't talk." Mr. Arable grinned. "Maybe our ears aren't as sharp as Fern's," he said. That's why I put on this sweater, is to look quite dadly today. I'm going to have to repeat the red sweater again next time because I only have 2 real dad sweaters, but we'll get by, all of us. Chapter 9, Wilbur's Boast. Thank you. A spider's web is stronger than it looks. Although it is made of thin, delicate strands, the web is not easily broken. However, a web gets torn every day by the insects that kick around in it, and a spider must rebuild it when it gets full of holes. Charlotte liked to do that. Charlotte liked to do her weaving during the late afternoon, and Fern liked to sit nearby and watch. One afternoon, she heard a most interesting conversation and witnessed a strange event.
"You have awfully hairy legs, Charlotte,"
said Wilbur, as the spider busily worked at her task.
"My legs are hairy for a good reason," replied Charlotte. "Furthermore, each leg of mine has 7 sections: the coxa, the trochanter, the femur, the patella, the tibia, the metatarsus, and the tarsus."
Wilbur sat bolt upright.
"You're kidding," he said.
"No, I'm not either."
"Say those names again. I didn't catch them the first time."
Coxa, trochanter, femur, patella, tibia, metatarsus, and tarsus.
"Goodness," said Wilbur, looking down at his own chubby legs.
"I don't think my legs have 7 sections."
"Well," said Charlotte, "you and I lead different lives. You don't have to spin a web. That takes real leg work."
"I could spin a web if I tried," said Wilbur, boasting. I've just never tried."
"Let's see you do it," said Charlotte.
Fern chuckled softly, and her eyes grew wide with love for the pig.
"Okay," replied Wilbur. "You coach me, and I'll spin one. It must be a lot of fun to spin a web. How do I start?"
"Take a deep breath,"
said Charlotte, smiling. Wilbur breathed deeply.
"Now climb to the highest place you can get to, like this."
Charlotte raced up to the top of the doorway. Wilbur scrambled to the top of the manure pile.
"Very good," said Charlotte. "Now make an attachment with your spinnerets, hurl yourself into space, and let out a drag line as you go down."
Wilbur hesitated a moment, then jumped out into the air. He glanced hastily behind him to see if a piece of rope was following him to check his fall, but nothing seemed to be happening in his rear, and the next thing he knew, he landed with a thump.
"Oh!"
he grunted. Charlotte laughed so hard her web began to sway.
"What did I do wrong?"
asked the pig when he recovered from his bump.
"Nothing," said Charlotte. "It was a nice try."
"I think I'll try again," said Wilbur cheerfully. "I believe what I need is a little piece of string to hold me."
The pig walked out into his yard.
"You there, Templeton?" "You there, Templeton?" he called.
The rat poked his head out from under the trough.
"Got a little piece of string I could borrow?" asked Wilbur. "I need it to spin a web." "Yes, indeed," replied Templeton, who saved string. "No trouble at all. Anything to oblige."
He crept down into his hole, pushed the goose egg out of the way, and returned with an old piece of dirty white string. Wilbur examined it.
"That's just the thing," he said. "Tie one end to my tail, will you, Templeton?"
Wilbur crouched low, with his thin, curly tail toward the rat. Templeton seized the string, passed it around the end of the pig's tail, and tied 2 half-hitches. Charlotte watched in delight. Like Fern, she was truly fond of Wilbur, whose smelly pen and stale food attracted the flies she needed, and she was proud to see that he was not a quitter and was willing to try again to spin a web. While the rat and the spider and the little girl watched, Wilbur climbed again to the top of the manure pile, full of energy and hope.
"Everybody watch!" he cried.
And summoning all his strength, he threw himself into the air, head first. The string trailed behind him, but as he had neglected to fasten the other end to anything, it didn't really do any good, and Wilbur landed with a thud, crushed and hurt. Tears came to his eyes. Templeton grinned. Charlotte just sat quietly. After a bit, she spoke.
"You can't spin a web, Wilbur, and I advise you to put the idea out of your mind. You lack 2 things needed for spinning a web."
"What are they?"
asked Wilbur, sadly.
You lack a set of spinnerets, and you lack know-how. But cheer up, you don't need a web. Zuckerman supplies you with 3 big meals a day. Why should you worry about trapping food?"
I love the illustration of Wilbur trying to take a leap and spin a web. And there's that weird little rat Templeton down there in the bottom. Thank you so much, you guys, and thank you for the follow. I appreciate it. Your kind words light up my night. Wilbur sighed.
You're so much cleverer and brighter than I am, Charlotte. I guess I was just trying to show off. It serves me right.
Templeton untied his string and took it back to his home. Charlotte returned to her weaving.
You needn't feel too badly, Wilbur. Not many creatures can spin webs. Even men aren't as good at it as spiders.
I'm going to try that sentence again.
Even men aren't as good at it as spiders, although they think they're pretty good, and they'll try anything. Did you ever hear of the Queensboro Bridge?
Wilbur shook his head.
Is it a web?
Sort of, replied Charlotte.
But do you know how long it took the men to build it? 8 whole years. My goodness, I would have starved to death waiting that long. I can make a web in a single evening. What do people catch in the Queensboro Bridge? Bugs?
Asked Wilbur.
No, said Charlotte. They don't catch anything. They just keep trotting back and forth across the bridge, thinking there is something better on the other side. If they'd hang head down at the top of the thing and wait quietly, maybe something good would come along. But no, with men it's rush, 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 every minute. I'm glad I'm a sedentary spider. What does sedentary mean? Asked Wilbur. Means I sit still a good part of the time and don't go wandering all over creation. I know a good thing when I see it, and my web is a good thing. I stay put and wait for what comes. Gives me a chance to think. Well, I'm sort of sedentary myself, I guess, said the pig. I have to hang around here whether I want to or not. You know, I would really like to go this evening. Where? In a forest, looking for beech nuts and truffles and delectable roots, pushing leaves aside with my wonderful strong nose, searching and sniffing along the ground, smelling, smelling, smelling. You smell just the way you are, remarked a lamb who had just walked in. I can smell you from here. You're the smelliest creature in the place.
Wilbur hung his head. His eyes grew wet with tears. Charlotte noticed his embarrassment as she spoke sharply to the lamb.
Let Wilbur alone, she said. He has a perfect right to smell, considering his surroundings. You're no bundle of sweet peas yourself. Furthermore, you're interrupting a very pleasant conversation. What were we talking about, Wilbur, when we were so rudely interrupted? Oh, I don't remember, said Wilbur. It doesn't make any difference. Let's not talk any more for a while, Charlotte. I'm getting sleepy. You go ahead and finish fixing your web, and I'll just lie here and watch you. It's a lovely evening.
Wilbur stretched out on his side. Twilight settled over Zuckerman's barn, and a feeling of peace. Fern knew it was almost supper time, but she couldn't bear to leave. Swallows passed on silent wings in and out of the doorways, bringing food to their young ones. From across the road a bird sang, "Whippoorwill, whippoorwill." Lurvy sat down under an apple tree and lit his pipe, and the animals sniffed the familiar smell of strong tobacco. Wilbur heard the trill of the tree-toad and the occasional slamming of the kitchen door. All these sounds made him feel comfortable and happy, for he loved life and loved to be a part of the world on a summer evening. But as he lay there, he remembered what the old sheep had told him. The thought of death came to him, and he began to tremble with fear. "Charlotte?" he said softly. "Yes, Wilbur? I don't want to die." "Of course you don't," said Charlotte in a comforting voice. "I just love it here in the barn. I love everything about this place." "Of course you do," said Charlotte. "We all do." The goose appeared, followed by her 7 goslings. They thrust their little necks out and kept up a musical whistling like a tiny troop of pipers. Wilbur listened to the sound with love in his heart. "Charlotte?" he said. "Yes," said the spider. "Were you serious when you promised you would keep them from killing me?" "I was never more serious in my life. I am not going to let you die, Wilbur." "Well, how are you going to save me?" asked Wilbur, whose curiosity was very strong at this point. "Well," said Charlotte, "I don't really know, but I'm working on a plan." I read that in Wilbur's voice. Apologies. "Well," said Charlotte vaguely, "I don't really know, but I'm working on a plan." "That's wonderful," said Wilbur. "How is the plan coming, Charlotte? Have you got very far with it? Is it coming along pretty well?" Wilbur was trembling again, but Charlotte was cool and collected.
"Oh, it's coming all right," she said lightly. "The plan is still in its early stages and hasn't completely shaped up yet, but I'm working on it."
"When do you work on it?" begged Wilbur.
"When I'm hanging head down at the top of my web, that's when I do my thinking, because then all the blood is in my head."
"I'd be only too glad to help any way I can."
"Oh, I'll work it out alone," said Charlotte. "I can think better if I think alone."
"All right," said Wilbur. "But don't fail to let me know if there's anything I can do to help, no matter how slight."
"Well," replied Charlotte, "you must try to build yourself up. Now, I want you to get plenty of sleep and stop worrying. Never hurry, and never worry. Chew your food thoroughly and eat every bit of it, except you must leave enough for Templeton. Gain weight and stay well. That's the way you can help. Keep fit, and don't lose your nerve. Do you think you understand?"
"Yes, I understand," said Wilbur.
"Go along to bed, then," said Charlotte. "Sleep is important."
Wilbur trotted over to the darkest corner of his pen and threw himself down. He closed his eyes. In another minute, he spoke.
"Charlotte,"
he said.
"Yes, Wilbur?"
May I go out to my trough and see if I left any of my supper? I think I left just a tiny bit of mashed potato."
"Very well," said Charlotte, "but I want you in bed again without delay."
Wilbur started to race out into his yard.
"Slowly, slowly," said Charlotte. "Never hurry, and never worry."
Wilbur checked himself and crept slowly to his trough. He found a bit of potato, chewed it carefully, swallowed it, and walked back to bed. He closed his eyes and was silent for a while.
"Charlotte,"
he said in a whisper.
"Yes?"
"May I get a drink of milk? I think there are a few drops of milk left in my trough."
"No, the trough is dry, and I want you to go to sleep. No more talking. Close your eyes and go to sleep."
Wilbur shut his eyes. Fern got up from her stool and started for home, her mind full of everything she had seen and heard.
"Good night, Charlotte," said Wilbur. Good night, Wilbur."
There was a pause.
"Good night, Charlotte." "Good night, Wilbur."
Good night. Good night. I'm very glad you're all enjoying it. I believe, let's see. And thank you so much for the follows. Really, really, really appreciate it. I'm really glad that everyone's joining us here tonight. It's nice. Okay, Shalom said pictures. There's another picture right here. There we go. Chapter 10, An Explosion. Day after day, the spider waited, head down, for an idea to come to her. Hour by hour, she sat motionless, deep in thought. Having promised Wilbur that she would save his life, she was determined to keep her promise. Charlotte was naturally patient. She knew from experience that if she waited long enough, a fly would come to her web, and she felt sure that if she thought long enough about Wilbur's problem, an idea would come to her mind. Finally, one morning, toward the middle of July, the idea came.
"Why, how perfectly simple," she said to herself. "The way to save Wilbur's life is to play a trick on Zuckerman. If I can fool a bug," thought Charlotte, "I can surely fool a man. People are not as smart as bugs."
That may be true. Wilbur walked into his yard just at that moment.
"What were you thinking about, Charlotte?"
he asked.
"I was just thinking," said the spider, "that people are very gullible."
"What does gullible mean?"
"Easy to fool," said Charlotte.
"That's a mercy," replied Wilbur, and he lay down in the shade of his fence and went fast asleep. The spider, however, stayed wide awake, gazing affectionately at him and making plans for his future. Summer was half gone. She knew she didn't have much time. That morning, just as Wilbur fell asleep, Avery Arable wandered into the Zuckerman's front yard, followed by Fern. Avery carried a live frog in his hand. Fern had a crown of daisies in her hair. The children ran for the kitchen.
"Just in time for a piece of blueberry pie,"
said Mrs. Zuckerman.
"Look at my frog,"
said Avery, placing the frog on the drain board and holding out his hand for pie.
"Take that thing out of here,"
said Mrs. Zuckerman.
"He's hot," said Fern. "He's almost dead, that frog." "He's not," said Avery. "He lets me scratch him between the eyes."
The frog jumped and landed in Mrs. Zuckerman's dishpan full of soapy water.
"You're getting your pie on you," said Fern. "Can I look for eggs in the hen house, Aunt Edith?" "Run outdoors, both of you, and don't bother the hens."
"It's getting all over everything," shouted Fern. "His pie is all over his front."
"Come on, frog,"
cried Avery. He scooped up his frog. The frog kicked, splashing soapy water onto the blueberry pie.
"Another crisis,"
groaned Fern.
"Let's swing in the swing,"
said Avery. The children ran to the barn. Mr. Zuckerman had the best swing in the county. It was a single long piece of heavy rope tied to the beam over the north doorway. At the bottom end of the rope was a fat knot to sit on. It was arranged so that you could swing without being pushed. You climbed a ladder to the hayloft. Then, holding the rope, you stood at the edge and looked down, and were scared and dizzy. Then you straddled the knot so that it acted as a seat. Then you got up all your nerve, took a deep breath, and jumped. For a second, you seemed to be falling to the barn floor far below, but then suddenly the rope would begin to catch you, and you would sail through the barn door, going a mile a minute, with the wind whistling in your eyes and ears and hair. Then you would zoom upward into the sky and look up at the clouds, and the rope would twist, and you would twist and turn with the rope. Then you would drop down, down, down out of the sky and come sailing back into the barn, almost into the hayloft. Then sail out again, not quite so far this time. Then in again, not quite so high. Then out again, then in again, then out, then in, and then you jump off and fall down and let somebody else try it. Mothers for miles around worried about Zuckerman's swing. They feared some child would fall off, but no child ever did. Children almost always hang on to things tighter than their parents think they will. Avery put the frog in his pocket and climbed into the hayloft.
"The last time I swang in this swing, I almost crashed into a barn swallow," he yelled.
"Take that frog out," ordered Fern. Avery straddled the rope and jumped. He sailed out through the door, frog and all, and into the sky, frog and all. Then he sailed back into the barn.
"Your tongue is purple,"
screamed Fern.
"So is yours,"
cried Avery, sailing out again with the frog.
"I have hay inside my dress. It itches," called Fern.
"Scratch it," yelled Avery as he sailed back.
"It's my turn," said Fern. "Jump off." "Fern's got the itch," sang Avery.
When he jumped off, he threw the swing up to his sister. She shut her eyes tight and jumped. She felt the dizzy drop and then the supporting lift of the swing. When she opened her eyes, she was looking up into the blue sky and was about to fly back through the door. They took turns for an hour. When the children grew tired of swinging, they went down toward the pasture and picked wild raspberries and ate them. Their tongues turned from purple to red. Fern bit into a raspberry that had a bad-tasting bug inside it and got discouraged. Avery found an empty candy box and put his frog in it. The frog seemed tired after his morning in the swing. The children walked up slowly to the barn. They, too, were tired and hardly had enough energy to watch. I am going to show you now another picture because Shalom and everyone else loves pictures. The barn swing. Thank you so much for the kind words.
"I'm going to visit Wilbur,"
Fern announced. They climbed the fence into the lane and walked lazily toward the pig pen. Wilbur heard them coming and got up. Avery noticed the spider web, and coming closer, he saw Charlotte.
"Hey, look at that big spider," he said. "It's tremendous."
"Leave it alone," commanded Fern.
"You've got a frog. Isn't that enough?"
"That's a fine spider, and I'm going to capture it," said Avery. He took off the cover of the candy box, and then he picked up a stick.
"I'm going to knock that old spider into this box," he said.
Wilbur's heart almost stopped when he saw what was going on. This might be the end of Charlotte if the boy succeeded in catching her.
You stop it, Avery!
Cried Fern. Avery put one leg over the fence of the pig pen. He was just about to raise his stick to hit Charlotte when he lost his balance. He swayed and toppled and landed on the edge of Wilbur's trough. The trough tipped up and then came down with a slap. The goose egg was right underneath. There was a dull explosion as the egg broke, and a horrible smell. Fern screamed. Avery jumped to his feet. The air was filled with the terrible gases and smells from the rotten egg. Templeton, who had been resting in his home, scuttled away into the barn.
Good night!
Screamed Avery.
Good night! What a stink! Let's get out of here!
Fern was crying. She held her nose and ran toward the house. Avery ran after her, holding his nose. Charlotte felt greatly relieved to see him go. It had been a narrow escape. Here is an image of Avery getting his just desserts. Thank you so much for the host, Valkyrie. Later on that morning, the animals came up from the pasture. The sheep, the lambs, the gander, the goose, and the 7 goslings. There were many complaints about the awful, awful smell, and Wilbur had to tell the story over and over again of how the arable boy had tried to capture Charlotte, and how the smell of the broken egg drove him away just in time.
It was that rotten goose egg that saved Charlotte's life, said Wilbur.
Thank you so much for the raid, Steffi. Welcome, hooligans, to story time. Grab a glass of water, snuggle up, and get comfy. We're reading Charlotte's Web. Here we go. The bot is a little tempestuous sometimes. The goose was proud of her share in the adventure.
I'm delighted the egg never hatched, she garbled.
Gabbled. What a word. Templeton, of course, was miserable over the loss of his beloved egg, but he couldn't resist boasting.
It pays to save things, he said in his surly voice. The rat never knows when something is going to come in handy. I never throw anything away.
Well, said one of the lambs, this whole business is well and good for Charlotte, but what about the rest of us? The smell is unbearable. Who wants to live in a barn that's perfumed with rotten egg?
Don't worry, you'll get used to it,
said Templeton. He sat up and pulled wisely at his long whiskers, then crept away to pay a visit to the dump. When Lurvy showed up at lunchtime carrying a pail of food for Wilbur, he stopped short a few paces from the pig pen. He sniffed the air and made a face.
What in thunder?
He said, setting the pail down. He picked up the stick that Avery had dropped and picked up the trough.
Rats, he said. Phew, I might have known a rat would make a nest under this trough. I hate a rat.
And Lurvy dragged Wilbur's trough across the yard and kicked some dirt into the rat's nest, burying the broken egg and all Templeton's other possessions. Then he picked up the pail. Wilbur stood in the trough, drooling with hunger. Lurvy poured. The slops ran creamily down around. The slops round... I'll get this sentence, I promise I will. The slops round... One more time.
It's a tricky one.
The slops ran creamily around the pig's eyes and ears. Wilbur grunted. He gulped and sucked and gulped, making swishing and swooshing noise, anxious to get everything at once. It was a delicious meal. Skim milk, wheat middlings, leftover pancakes, half a donut, the rind of a summer squash, 2 pieces of stale toast, a third of ginger snap, a fishtail, 1 orange peel, several noodles from a noodle soup, the scum off a cup of cocoa, an ancient jelly roll, a strip of paper from the lining of the garbage pail, and a spoonful of raspberry jello. Wilbur ate heartily. He planned to leave half a noodle and a few drops of milk for Templeton. Then he remembered that the rat had been useful in saving Charlotte's life, and that Charlotte was trying to save his life. So he left a whole noodle instead of a half. Now that the broken egg was buried, the air cleaned and the barn smelled good again. The afternoon passed and evening came. Shadows lengthened. The cool and kindly breath of evening entered through doors and windows. Astride her web, Charlotte sat moodily eating a horsefly and thinking about the future. After a while, she bestirred herself. She descended to the center of the web, and there she began to cut some of her lines. She worked slowly but steadily while the other creatures drowsed. None of the others, not even the goose, noticed that she was at work. Deep in his soft bed, Wilbur snoozed. Over in their favorite corner, the goslings whistled a night song. Charlotte tore quite a section out of her web, leaving an open space in the middle. Then she started weaving something to take the place of the threads she had removed. When Templeton got back from the dump, around midnight, the spider was still at work. And that leaves us at chapter 11, The Miracle. Shall we continue? What do you think, Molly?
What was that?
Shall we continue?
I can't hear you anymore.
Oh, dear. How about now? Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you.
There we go.
Yeah, if you want to keep reading, keep reading.
Okay. I think I will read. This is, boy, that's a lot of interesting copy and paste in the chat. Thank you for all the kind words, and thank you for the follows, everyone. I appreciate it very much. Chapter 11, The Miracle. The next day was foggy. Everything on the farm was dripping wet. The grass looked like a magic carpet. The asparagus patch looked like a silver forest. On foggy mornings, Charlotte's web was truly a thing of beauty. This morning, each thin strand was decorated with dozens of tiny beads of water. The web glistened in the light and made a pattern of loveliness and mystery, like a delicate veil. Even Lurvy, who wasn't particularly interested in beauty, noticed the web when he came with the pig's breakfast. He noted how clearly it showed up, and he noted how big and carefully built it was. And then he took another look, and he saw something that made him set his pail down. There, in the center of the web, neatly woven in block letters, was a message. It said, "Some pig." Lurvy felt weak. He brushed his hand across his eyes and stared harder at Charlotte's web. "I'm seeing things," he whispered. He dropped to his knees and uttered a short prayer. Then, forgetting all about Wilbur's breakfast, he walked back to the house and called Mr. Zuckerman. "I think you better come down to the pig pen," he said. "What's the trouble?" asked Mr. Zuckerman. "Anything wrong with the pig?" "Not exactly," said Lurvy. "Come and see for yourself." The two men walked silently down to Wilbur's yard. Lurvy pointed at the spider's web. "You see what I see?" he asked. Zuckerman stared at the writing on the web. Then he murmured the words, "Some pig." Then he looked at Lurvy. Then they both began to tremble. Charlotte, sleepy after her night's exertions, smiled as she watched. Wilbur came and stood directly under the web. "Some pig," muttered Lurvy in a low voice. "Some pig," whispered Mr. Zuckerman. They stared and stared for a long time at Wilbur. Then they stared at Charlotte. "You don't suppose that spider," began Mr. Zuckerman, but shook his head and didn't finish the sentence. Instead, he walked solemnly back up to the house and spoke to his wife. "Edith, something has happened," he said in a weak voice. He went into the living room and sat down, and Mrs. Zuckerman followed. "I got something to tell you, Edith," he said. You better sit down." Mrs. Zuckerman sank into a chair. She looked pale and frightened. "Edith," he said, trying to keep his voice steady, "I think you had best be told that we have a very unusual pig." A look of complete bewilderment came over Mrs. Zuckerman's face. "Homer Zuckerman, what in the world are you talking about?" she said. "This is a very serious thing, Edith," he replied.
Our pig is completely out of the ordinary.
What's unusual about the pig? Asked Mrs. Zuckerman, who was beginning to recover from her scare.
Well, I don't really know yet, said Mr. Zuckerman. But we have received a sign, Edith. A mysterious sign. A miracle has happened on this farm. There is a large spider's web in the doorway of the barn cellar, right over the pig pen. And when Lurvy went out to feed the pig this morning, he noticed the web because it was foggy. You know how a spider's web looks very distinct in a fog? And right spang in the middle of the web were the words, "Some pig." The words were woven right into the web. They're actually part of the web, Edith. I know because I have been down there and seen them. It says, "Some pig." Just as clear as it can be. There can be no mistake about it. A miracle has happened, and a sign has occurred here, on Earth, right on our farm. And we have no ordinary pig.
Well, said Mrs. Zuckerman, it seems to me you're a little off. It seems like me we have no ordinary spider.
Oh, no, said Zuckerman. It's a pig that's unusual. It says so, right there in the middle of the web.
Maybe so, said Mrs. Zuckerman. Just the same, I intend to have a look at that spider.
It's just a common gray spider, said Mr. Zuckerman.
They got up together, and they walked down to Wilbur's yard.
You see, Edith? It's just a common gray spider.
Wilbur was pleased to receive so much attention. Lurvy was still standing there, and Mr. and Mrs. Zuckerman, all three, stood for about an hour, reading the words on the web over and over and over, and watching Wilbur. Charlotte was delighted with the way her trick was working. She sat without moving a muscle and listened to the conversation of the people. When a small fly blundered into the web just beyond the word pig, Charlotte dropped quickly down, rolled the fly up, and carried it out of the way. After a while the fog lifted, the web dried off, and the words didn't show up so plainly. The Zuckermans and Lurvy walked back to the house. Just before they left the pig pen, Mr. Zuckerman took one last look at Wilbur.
You know, he said in an important voice, I thought all along that pig of ours was an extra good one. He's a solid pig. That pig is as solid as they come. You notice how solid he is around the shoulders, Lurvy? Sure I do, said Lurvy. I've always noticed that. He's quite a pig. He's long and he's smooth, said Zuckerman. That's right, agreed Lurvy. He's as smooth as they come. He's some pig.
When Mr. Zuckerman got back to the house, he took off his work clothes and put on his best suit. Then he got in his car and drove to the minister's house. He stayed for an hour and explained to the minister that a miracle had happened on the farm.
So far, said Zuckerman, only 4 people on Earth know about this miracle. Myself, my wife Edith, my hired man Lurvy, and you.
Don't tell anyone else, said the minister. We don't know what it means yet, but perhaps if I give thought to it, I can explain it in my sermon next Sunday. There can be no doubt that you have a most unusual pig. I intend to speak about it in my sermon and point out the fact that this community has been visited with a wondrous animal. By the way, does the pig have a name?
Why, yes, said Mr. Zuckerman. My little niece calls him Wilbur. He's a rather queer child, full of notions. She raised the pig on the bottle, and I bought him from her when she was a month old.
He shook hands with the minister and left. Secrets are hard to keep. Long before Sunday came, the news spread all over the county. Everybody knew that a sign had appeared in a spider's web on the Zuckerman place. Everybody knew that the Zuckermans had a wondrous pig. People came from miles around to look at Wilbur and to read the words on Charlotte's web. The Zuckermans' driveway was full of cars and trucks from morning till night. Fords and Chevys and Buick Roadmasters and GMC pickups and Plymouths and Studebakers and Packers and DeSotos with gyromatic transmissions and Oldsmobiles with rocket engines and Jeep station wagons and Pontiacs. The news of the wonderful pig spread up clear into the hills, and farmers came rattling down in buggies and buckboards to stand hour after hour at Wilbur's pen, admiring the miraculous animal. All said they had never seen such a pig before in their lives. When Fern told her mother that Avery had tried to hit the Zuckerman spider with a stick, Mrs. Arable was so shocked she sent Avery to bed without any supper, as punishment. In the days that followed, Mr. Zuckerman was so busy entertaining visitors that he neglected his farm work. He wore his good clothes all the time now, got right into them when he got up in the morning. Mrs. Zuckerman prepared special meals for Wilbur. Lurvy shaved and got a haircut, and his principal farm duty was to feed the pig while people looked on. Mr. Zuckerman ordered Lurvy to increase Wilbur's feedings from 3 meals a day to 4 meals a day. The Zuckermans were so busy with visitors they forgot about other things on the farm. The blackberries got ripe, and Mrs. Zuckerman failed to put up any blackberry jam. The corn needed hoeing, and Lurvy didn't find time to hoe it. On Sunday, the church was full. The minister explained the miracle. He said that the words on the spider's web proved that human beings must always be on the watch for the coming of wonders. All in all, the Zuckerman's pig pen was the center of attraction. Fern was happy, for she felt that Charlotte's trick was working, and that Wilbur's life would be saved. But she found that the barn was not nearly as pleasant. Too many people. She liked it better when she could be all alone with her friends, the animals. And I believe that is where I am going to stop for the evening, because my voice is screaming. My throat is screaming. Whew. And I believe that I have lost Molly. Oh no, please be patient while I try to reacquire Molly.
Hello?
Hey, you're back. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. That actually worked.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. It said you were offline.
I think maybe the window just timed out. Well, so that was sort of the iconic scene from Charlotte's Web that we got to experience together. It's and a little bit of character building perhaps for little Mr. Wilbur. It's exciting. I like this book.
Did we want to read? Did you guys want to read more, or do we want to read more of Wonder, or did we want to call it a night? What did you guys want in chat? What are you up to, BJ?
I'm up for either. I was enjoying Wonder. I also
Yeah,
would
I really
enjoy.
like that book a lot so far.
Yeah. Why don't well, we've been on for about an hour and 45 minutes. So why don't you give us a couple more diary entries from Wonder,
Okay.
and we'll see where that leaves us.
All right. For those of you just joining us, we are reading this book called Wonder by PJ, I want to say Palacio is the name of the author.
It looked like
It's about
yeah.
Go ahead.
Palacio, maybe? I think
Maybe.
yeah.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. It's probably Palacio. Anyway, it's about a boy with some sort of facial deformation. And the book is written in diary entry style, and we've gotten to the point where his parents want him to go to school, and he is at the school right now, meeting the principal and some of the teachers and everything like that. He lives with his mom and his dad and his older sister. And his name is August, and he is 10 years old, I think.
I think that's right.
But okay. Oh yeah, I forgot that we kind of stopped. Okay. So this diary entry is called Jack, Will, Julian, and Charlotte. We followed Mr. Tushman into a small room across from Mrs. Garcia's desk. He was talking as he closed the door to his office and sat down behind his big desk, though I wasn't really paying much attention to what he was saying. I was looking around at all the things on his desk. Cool stuff, like a globe that floated in the air and a Rubik's type cube made with little mirrors. I liked his office a lot. I liked that there were all these neat little drawings and paintings by students on the walls, framed like they were important. Mom sat down in a chair in front of Mr. Tushman's desk, and even though there was another chair right next to hers, I decided to stand beside her. Why do you have your own room and Mrs. G doesn't? I said. You mean, why do I have an office? Asked Mr. Tushman. You said she runs the place, I said. Oh, well, I was kind of kidding. Mrs. G is my assistant. Mr. Tushman is the director of the middle school, Mom explained. Do they call you Mr. T? I asked, which made him smile. Do you know who Mr. T is? He answered. I pity the fool. He said it in a funny voice, like he was imitating somebody. I had no idea what he was talking about. Anyway, no, said Mr. Tushman, shaking his head. No one calls me Mr. T, though I have a feeling I'm called a lot of other things that I don't know about. Let's face it, a name like mine is not so easy to live with, you know what I mean? Here, I have to admit, I totally laughed because I knew exactly what he meant. My mom and dad had a teacher called Miss Butt, I said. Augie, said Mom, but Mr. Tushman laughed. Now that's bad, said Mr. Tushman, shaking his head. I guess I shouldn't complain. Hey, so listen, August, here's what I thought we would do today. Is that a pumpkin? I said, pointing to a framed painting behind Mr. Tushman's desk. Augie, sweetie, don't interrupt, said Mom. You like it? Said Mr. Tushman, turning around and looking at the painting. I do too. And I thought it was a pumpkin too, until the student who gave it to me explained that it was actually not a pumpkin. It is, are you ready for this? A portrait of me. Now, August, I ask you, do I really look like that much of a pumpkin? No, I answered, though I was thinking yes. Something about the way his cheeks puffed out when he smiled made him look like a jack-o'-lantern. Just as I thought that, it occurred to me how funny that was. Cheeks, Mr. Tushman. I had started laughing a little. I shook my head and covered my mouth with my hand. Mr. Tushman smiled like he could read my mind. I was about to say something else, but then all of a sudden I heard other voices outside the office. Kids' voices. I'm not exaggerating when I say this, but my heart literally started beating, like I just run the longest race in the world. The laughter I had inside just poured out of me. The thing is, when I was little, I never minded meeting new kids because all the kids I met were really little too. So what's cool about really little kids is that they don't say stuff to try to hurt your feelings, even though sometimes they do say stuff that hurts your feelings. But they don't actually know what they're saying. But kids, though, they know what they're saying, and that is definitely not fun for me. One of the reasons I grew my hair long last year was that I like how my bangs cover my eyes. It helps me block out the things I don't want to see. Mrs. Garcia knocked on the door and poked her head inside. They're here, Mr. Tushman, she said. Who's here? I said. Thanks, said Mr. Tushman to Mrs. Garcia. August, I thought it would be a good idea for you to meet some students who will be in your homeroom this year. I figured they could take you around the school a bit, show you the lay of the land, so to speak. I don't want to meet anyone, I said to Mom. Mr. Tushman was suddenly right in front of me, his hands on my shoulders. He leaned down and said very softly in my ear, It'll be okay, August. These are nice kids, I promise. You're going to be okay, Augie, Mom whispered with all her might. Before she could say anything else, Mr. Tushman opened the door to his office. Come on in, kids, he said, and in walked two boys and a girl. None of them looked over at me or Mom. They stood by the door looking straight at Mr. Tushman, like their lives depended on it. Thanks so much for coming, guys, especially since school doesn't start until next month, said Mr. Tushman. Have you had a good summer? All of them nodded, but no one said anything. Great, said Mr. Tushman. So, guys, I wanted you to meet August. He's going to be a new student here this year. August, these guys have been students at Beecher Prep since kindergarten, though. Of course, they were in the lower school building, but they know all the ins and outs of middle school program. And since you're all in the same homeroom, I thought it would be nice if you got to know each other a little before school started. Okay? So kids, this is August. August, this is Jack Will. Jack Will looked at me, put out his hands. Jack Will looked at me and put out his hands. When I shook it, he kind of half smiled and said, Hey. That is definitely not a little kid's voice. Sorry. When I shook it, he kind of half smiled and said, "Hey," and looked down really fast. "This is Julian," said Mr. Tishman. "Hey," said they're all gonna have the same voice, sorry, said Julian, and did the exact same thing as Jack will. Took my hand, forced a smile, looked down fast. "And Charlotte," said Mr. Tishman. Charlotte had the blondest hair I've ever seen. She didn't shake my hand, but gave me a quick little wave and smile. "Hi." "Hi, August. Nice to meet you," she said. "Hi," I said, looking down. She was wearing bright green Crocs. Uh, "So," said Mr. Tishman, putting his hands together in a kind of slow clap, "what I thought you guys could do is take August on a little tour of the school. Maybe you could start on the third floor? That's where your homeroom that's where your homeroom class is going to be. Room 301, I think. Mrs. G is Room 301, Mrs. Garcia called out from the other room. Room 301, Mr. Tishman nodded. And then you can show August the science labs and the computer room. Then work your way down to the library and the performance space on the second floor. Take him to the cafeteria, of course." "Should we take him to the music room?" asked Julian. "Good idea. Yes," said Mr. Tishman. "August, do you play any instruments?" "No," I said. It wasn't my favorite subject on account of the fact that I don't really have ears. Well, I do, but they don't exactly look like normal ears. "Well, you may enjoy seeing the music room anyway," said Mr. Tishman. "We have a very nice selection of percussion instruments." "August, you've been wanting to learn to play the drums," Mom said, trying to get me to look at her. But my eyes were covered by my bangs, and I stared at a piece of old gum that was stuck to the bottom of Mr. Tishman's desk. "Great. Okay, so why don't you guys get going?" said Mr. Tishman. "Just be back here in," he looked at Mom, "half an hour, okay?" I think Mom nodded. "So is that okay with you, August?" he asked. I didn't answer. "Is that okay, August?" Mom repeated. I looked at her now. I wanted her to see how mad I was at her, but then I saw her face and just nodded. She seemed more scared than I was. The other kids had started out the door, so I followed them. "See you soon," said Mom, her voice sounding a little higher than normal. I didn't answer her. So I think these entries are starting to get progressively, well, they're a little bit longer. They're each like 2 pages now. My voice is getting super dry, so I think
Is it getting
if you
tired?
guys are okay with that, I might call it there.
Okay.
But if you guys want me to read another one, I will. But I just need to take some water. Sorry, I felt like I was getting dry mouth during that.
That's okay. It happens. If it's not too much trouble for you, I would love to hear one more. I'm kind of getting invested in this story, so I like hearing sort of the progression. We're learning a little bit more about Augie and a little bit more about his situation. And if you can handle maybe one more entry, I think that would be wonderful.
Yeah. For sure. Sorry, I was just afraid of mouth noises coming through on the mic.
You're sounding wonderful so far.
Okay, so he has. So I really think that the cover art really does kind of give an idea of what his malformations are. So
Yeah.
I guess his ears and his eyes are maybe just a little bit different than the average individual. All right. This one is called The Grand Tour. Jack, Will, Julian, Charlotte, and I went down a big hallway to some wide stairs. No one said a word as we walked up to the third floor. When we got to the top of the stairs, we went down a little hallway full of lots of doors. Julian opened the door marked 301. "This is our homeroom," he said, standing in front of the half-open door. We have Miss Petosa. They say she's okay, at least for homeroom. I heard she's really strict if you get her for math." That's not true," said Charlotte. "My sister had her last year and said she's totally nice." "Not what I heard," answered Julian, "but whatever." He closed the door and continued walking down the hallway. "This is the science lab," he said when he got to the next door. And just like that, he did 2 seconds ago. And just like he did 2 seconds ago, he stood in front of the half-open door and started talking. He didn't look at me once while he talked, which was okay because I wasn't looking at him either. "You won't know who you have for science until the first day of school, but you want to get Mr. Holler. He used to be in the lower school. He would play this giant tuba in class. It was a baritone horn, said Charlotte. It was a tuba, answered Julian, closing the door. Dude, let him go inside so he can check it out, Jack Will told him, pushing past Julian and opening the door. Go inside if you want, Julian said. It was the first time he looked at me. I struggled and walked over to the door. I shrugged and walked over to the door. Julian moved out of the way quickly, like he was afraid I might accidentally touch him as I passed by him. Nothing much to see, Julian said, walking in after me. He started pointing to a bunch of stuff around the room. That's the incubator. The big black thing is called the chalkboard. These are the desks. These are chairs. Those are the Bunsen burners. This is a gross science poster. This is chalk. This is the eraser. I'm sure he knows what an eraser is, Charlotte said, sounding a little like Via. Via's his sister, by the way. How would I know what he knows? Julian answered. Mr. Tishman said he's never been to his school before. You know what an eraser is, right? Charlotte asked me. I admit I was feeling so nervous that I didn't know what to say or do except look at the floor. Hey, can you talk? Asked Jack Will. Yeah, I nodded. I still really hadn't looked at any of them yet, not directly. You know what an eraser is, right? Asked Jack Will. Of course, I mumbled. I told you there was nothing to see in here, said Julian, shrugging. I have a question, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. What exactly is homeroom? Is that like a subject? No, that's your group, explained Charlotte, ignoring Julian's smirk. It's like where you go when you get to school in the morning and your homeroom teacher takes attendance and stuff like that. In a way, it's your main class, even though it's not really a class. I mean, it's a class, but I think he gets it, Charlotte, said Jack Will. Do you get it? Charlotte asked me. Yeah, I nodded at her. Okay, let's get out of here, said Jack Will, walking away. Wait, Jack, we're supposed to be answering questions, said Charlotte. Jack Will rolled his eyes a little as he turned around. Do you have any more questions? He asked. No, I answered. Oh, well, actually, yes. Is your name Jack or Jack Will? Jack is my first name, Will is my last name. Oh, because Mr. Tushman introduced you as Jack Will, so I thought, ha, you thought his name was Jack Will, laughed Julian. Yeah, some people call me by my first and last name, Jack said, shrugging. I don't know why. Anyway, can we go now? Let's go to the performance space next, said Charlotte, leading the way out of the science room. It's very cool. You'll like it, August. Okay, I kind of want to read the performance space and realize I'm like super invested in this book. I like Charlotte. The boys are just kind of boys. That's okay.
They're fun. It's interesting learning about each one of these people, and I like your unique little voices for each one of them.
Yeah, Jack Will and Julian have pretty much the same voice, and Charlotte, I think, is just the mom, but a little higher pitched. But we're getting there.
All of my Charlotte's Web voices are some variation on 2 voices, so.
I disagree, but.
Okay, 3.
I'm glad you like it. So this one is called The Performance Space. Charlotte basically didn't stop talking as we headed down to the second floor. She was describing the play they had put on last year, which was Oliver. She played Oliver even though she's a girl. As she said this, she pushed open the double doors to a huge auditorium. At the other end of the room was a stage. Charlotte started skipping toward the stage. Julian ran after her and then turned around halfway down the aisle. Come on, he said. Come on, he said loudly, waving for me to follow him, which I did. There were like hundreds of people in the audience that night, said Charlotte, and it took me a second to realize she was still talking about Oliver. I was so nervous. I had so many lines, and I had all these songs to sing. It was so hard. Although she was talking to me, she really didn't look at me much. On opening night, my parents were all the way in the back of the auditorium, like where Jack is right now. But when the lights are off, you can't really see that far back. So I was like, where are my parents? Where are my parents? And then Mr. Resnick, our theater arts teacher last year, He said, Charlotte, stop being such a diva. And I was like, okay. And then I spotted my parents and I was totally fine. I didn't forget a single line. While she was talking, I noticed Julian staring at me out of the corner of his eye. This is something I see people do a lot with me. They think I don't know they're staring, but I can tell from the way their heads are tilted. I turned around to see where Jack had gone to. He stayed in the back of the auditorium like he was bored. We put on a play every year, said Charlotte. I don't think he's I don't think he's going to want to be in the school play, Charlotte, Julian said sarcastically. You can be in the play without actually being in the play, Charlotte answered, looking at me. You can do the lighting. You can paint the backdrops. Oh, yeah, whoopee, said Julian, twirling his finger in the air. But you don't have to take theater arts elective if you don't want to, Charlotte said, shrugging. There's dance or chorus or band. There's leadership. Only dorks take leadership, Julian interrupted. Julian, you're being so obnoxious, said Charlotte, which made Julian laugh. I'm taking the science elective, I said. Cool, said Charlotte. Julian looked directly at me. The science elective is supposedly the hardest elective of all, he said. No offense, but if you've never ever been in a school before, why do you think you're suddenly going to be smart enough to take the science elective? I mean, have you ever even studied science before? Like real science, not like the kind you do in kits? Yeah, I nodded. He was homeschooled, Julian, said Charlotte. So teachers came to his house? Asked Julian, looking puzzled. No, his mother taught him, answered Charlotte. Is she a teacher? Julian said. Is your mother a teacher? Charlotte asked me. No, I said. So she's not a real teacher, said Julian, as if that proved his point. That's what I mean. How can anyone who's not a real teacher actually teach science? I'm sure you'll do fine, said Charlotte, looking at me. Let's just go to the library now, Jack called out, sounding really bored. Why is your hair so long? Julian said to me. He sounded like he was annoyed. I didn't know what to say, so I just shrugged. Can I ask you a question? He asked. I shrugged again. Didn't he just ask me a question? What's the deal with your face? I mean, were you in a fire or something? Julian, that's so rude, said Charlotte. I'm not being rude, said Julian. I'm just asking a question. Mr. Tushman said we could ask questions if we wanted to. Not rude questions like that, said Charlotte. Besides, he was born like that. That's what Mr. Tushman said. You just weren't listening. I was so listening, said Julian. I just thought maybe he was in a fire too. Geez, Julian said Jack. Just shut up. You shut up, Julian yelled. Come on, August, said Jack. Let's go to the library already. I walked towards Jack and followed him out of the auditorium. He held the double doors open for me, and as I passed by, he looked at me right in the face, kind of daring me to look back at him, which I did. Then I actually smiled. I don't know. Sometimes when I have the feeling like I'm almost crying, it can turn into an almost laughing feeling. And that must have been the feeling I was having then, because I smiled almost like I was going to giggle. The thing is, because of the way my face is, people who don't know me very well don't always get that I'm smiling. My mouth doesn't go up at the corners the way other people's mouths do. It just goes straight across my face. But somehow Jack Will got that I had smiled at him, and he smiled back. Julian's a jerk, he whispered before Julian and Charlotte reached us. But dude, you're going to have to talk. He said this seriously, like he was trying to help me. I nodded as Julian and Charlotte caught up to us. We were all quiet for a second, all of us just kind of nodding, looking at the floor. Then I looked up at Julian. The word supposedly, by the way, I said. What are you talking about? You said supposedly before, I said. I did not. Yeah, you did, Charlotte nodded. You said the science elective is supposedly really hard. I heard you. I absolutely did not, he insisted. Whatever, said Jack. Let's just go. Yeah, let's just go, agreed Charlotte, following Jack down the stairs to the next floor. I started to follow her, but Julian cut right in front of me, which actually made me stumble backwards. Oops, sorry about that, said Julian, but I could tell from the way he looked at me that he wasn't really sorry at all. Oh, that's like a cliffhanger.
If you want to keep going, you're more than welcome to.
What's that?
If you want to keep going, you're more than welcome to.
What are our thoughts in chat? Sorry, I'm just gonna let me catch up real quick. Do you guys want me to do one more chapter or one more entry? What do you guys think of the new kids? When you get into dialogue, when they're talking back and forth to each other, and especially because kids speak really quickly naturally,
It gets
it's really hard
tough.
to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Avery and Fern parts in Charlotte's Web were really difficult for me because, you know, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
Yeah, I totally empathize more. Let me see, what's the next chapter?
If you're feeling
Or
like you're
next
up for
entry
another
link?
one,
What's that?
if you're feeling like you're up for another one, I would love to hear another one.
We'll do that. We'll make this one the last one because this one's kind of short. This one's called The Deal. Mom and Mr. Tishman were talking when we got back to the office. Mrs. Garcia was the first to see us come back, and she started smiling her shiny smile as we walked in. So, August, what did you think? Did you like what you saw? She asked. Yeah, I nodded, looking over at Mom. Jack, Julian, and Charlotte were standing by the door, not sure where to go or if they were still needed. I wonder what else they'd been told about me before they'd meet me. Did you see my baby chick? Mom asked me. As I shook my head, Julian said, Are you talking about the baby chicks in science? Those get donated to a farm at the end of every school year. Oh, said Mom, disappointed. But they hatch new ones every year in science, Julian added. So August will be able to see them again in the spring. Oh, good, said Mom, eyeing me. They were so cute, August. I wish she wouldn't talk to me like I was a baby in front of other people. So, August, said Mr. Tishman, did these guys show you around enough, or do you want to see more? I realize I forgot to ask them to show you the gym. We did anyway, Mr. Tishman, said Julian. Excellent, said Mr. Tishman. And I told him about the school play and some of the electives, said Charlotte. Oh no, she said suddenly. We forgot to show him the art room. That's okay, said Mr. Tishman. But we can show it to him now, Charlotte offered. Don't we have to pick up Via soon? I said to Mom. That was our signal for my telling Mom if I really wanted to leave. Oh, you're right, said Mom, getting up. I could tell she was pretending to check the time on her watch. I'm sorry, everybody. I lost track of time. We have to go pick up my daughter at her new school. She's taking an unofficial tour today. This part wasn't a lie. That Via was checking out her new school today. The part that was a lie was that we were picking her up at the school, which we weren't. She was coming home with Dad later. Where does she go to school? Asked Mr. Tishman, getting up. She's starting Fokker High School this fall. Wow, that's not an easy school to get into. Good for her. Thank you, said Mom, nodding. It'll be a bit of a schlep, though. The A train down to 86, then the crosstown bus all the way to East Side. Takes an hour that way, but it's just a 15-minute drive. It'll be worth it. I know a couple of kids who go into Faulkner and love it, said Mr. Tishman. We really should go, Mom, I said, tugging at her pocketbook. We said goodbye kind of quickly after that. I think Mr. Tishman was a little surprised that we were leaving so suddenly. And then I wondered if he would blame Jack and Charlotte, even though it was really only Julian who made me feel kind of bad. Everyone was really nice. I made sure to tell Mr. Tishman before we left. I look forward to having you as a student, Mr. Tishman said, patting my back. Bye, I said to Jack, Charlotte, and Julian, but I didn't look at them or look up at all until I left the building. So I think that's a good place to end.
All right, sounds like it. This is a really interesting book, and I'm really invested in it now.
Yeah, me too. I really like it. And I get why it was so suggested.
Yeah. Where did that suggestion come from?
I just looked it up on Amazon. I just looked up children's books,
Oh,
and
nice.
I saw that it had because I was looking for longer ones. Excuse me, and I read a bunch of the reviews, and I thought that since I knew that it was about a kid with some form of disability, and so I thought it would be kind of interesting. And I wanted it to be an option for my niece too, because I wanted her to like kind of have that as she gets older. So yeah, and had really great reviews, and everybody kept saying that even if you're not a kid, you should read this book. And I get why with his comments about how adults look at him even, and I think it kind of makes me reflect on how I interact with people that maybe have disabilities or just anything, like any physical attribute that maybe we aren't used to seeing.
Yeah, it's a good one for self-reflection, and I like it. I can't wait to hear. Can't wait to hear more about it or more from it next time. Molly, did you have a little a few little words of positivity for us for the end of tonight's stream?
Did I have what? I'm sorry.
Did you have any words of positivity for us for the end of tonight's stream?
Oh yeah. 1 second. The last book for this evening is called The Wonderful Things You Will Be, and it is by Emily Winfield Martin. And this is also another best-selling book. I thought it would be something along the lines of The Places You'll Go. So, we decided we wanted to kind of end each night with some kind of positivity story. So this is The Wonderful Things You Will Be by Emily Winfield Martin.
I'm sorry, Molly. Would you mind starting that over? I am a complete doofus.
That's okay. When I look at you and you look at me, I wonder what wonderful things you will be. When you were too small to tell me hello, I knew you're someone I wanted to know. For all of your tininess couldn't disguise a heart so enormous and wild and wise. Oops, sorry for bumping the mic there. This is the first time there's ever been you, so I wonder what wonderful things you will do. Will you stand up for good by saving the day? Or play a song only you know how to play? Will you tell a story that only you know? Will you learn what it means to help things to grow? Will you learn how to fly to find the best view? Or take care of things much smaller than you? I know you'll be kind and clever. And bold. And the bigger your heart, the more it will hold. When nights are black, when days are gray, you'll be brave and be bright, so no shadows can stay. Then you will discover all there is to see. Then you will discover all there is to see. And become anybody that you'd like to be. This is neat. So cut these. You can become anything you want to be. And then folds open to show
Aw.
these different characters
How
for you
cute.
to be.
You can
Which
even
I
be a
think is
tree.
a really neat feature. Not feature, like it's a phone, but just I think that's a cute little touch. And then I'll look at you, and you'll look at me, and I'll love you, whoever you've grown up to be. And that is The Wonderful Things You Will Be by Emily Winfield Martin, which is a very sweet little book. I really like that a lot.
That was lovely. Thank you, Molly.
You're welcome.
And thank you, everyone, for joining us this week, or this episode. I don't know exactly how to call it on Twitch these days. But thank you to everyone for joining us. We really appreciate it. So far in these two streams, the response has been quite a lot more than I expected it would be, and it warms my heart, and I really appreciate it. I'm glad that people like it. I'm glad that you guys like it. I'm glad that you guys are joining us, and I hope it makes you all feel wonderful. Hope it makes a nice little end for your evenings, or just a nice little spot in whatever time of day it is for you. I don't want to get all verklempt or anything right now, but I'm just really happy that the way things are turning out so far. It's you guys are wonderful, and Molly, you are wonderful.
It's been really great. I think we were both a little surprised at how excited people are about it.
Yeah.
So thank you guys for continually showing up and interacting and enjoying, and because that's the goal, is just to make people feel good and feel comfy and relaxed.
Exactly. And so thank you for the follows, and thank you for the raids and the hosts. It's wonderful that you guys want to be a part of what we're doing. So we're going to, I think, share the love a little bit. If you're not quite ready for bedtime, our wonderful friend K-Pocalypse, who sent some love our way last week, I think we're going to send some love her way this week. So if you wouldn't mind, if you're not ready for bed, joining us over at Kay's channel. I'm not sure what she's playing right now, but it's probably No Man's Sky. That'd be my guess anyway. But
yeah, I think she is.
I'm going to hit the music. You have some raid tools at your disposal in the chat, so copy those, and when we get over to Kay's channel, just drop those in the chat and say hello. Any final words tonight, Molly?
What's that? Sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
It's okay. Any final words tonight, Molly?
Just good night, sleep tight, and thank you for being with us. It's been a lot of fun.
Good night. We love you.